beings have inside of them a bunch of enzymes. They're special proteins that act as catalysts, which just means they help chemical reactions speed up by either breaking down or combining one specific thing. For example, lactase breaks down lactose, the sugar found in milk. Okay, so enzymes make life possible by speeding up chemical reactions, but what even is life? Scientists don't really seem to agree, but obviously a cat is different from a rock. The cat can produce energy by metabolizing food, it can grow and develop, reproduce, and it responds to the environment, whereas the rock does not. Also, unlike rocks, every living thing on Earth is made of cells, of which there's two main categories, eukaryotes and prokaryotes. Eukaryotes have fancy organelles which are bound by membranes, like the nucleus inside of which is DNA. Prokaryotes have none of those organelles, and the DNA is just kinda chilling there, like freely floating around. This is why prokaryotes are just single-cell organisms like bacteria and archaea, whereas eukaryotes can form complex organisms like protists, fungi, plants, and animals. These are what's known as kingdoms, which is a taxonomic rank, so basically how we classify different living things and how they're related to one another. Because there are quite a few species of life on this planet, and naming them cat, dangerous cat, and water cat wouldn't really be all that helpful, we also give every species a unique and unambiguous scientific name consisting of the genus and the species. One thing every species has in common is homeostasis, aka keeping certain conditions in check so you don't die. If you feel warm, your body will sweat. If you're cold, your body will shiver. A cell does kind of the same thing, just that it balances out concentrations of certain chemicals. You see, enzymes, for example, only work in a very specific environment, let's say some specific pH value. If this changes too much, the enzymes will denature and won't work anymore. To counter this, the cell needs to constantly keep up this specific pH value, which is controlled by the concentration of acid and base molecules. Okay, but how does the cell do that? The secret lies in the cell membrane. You see, it's a semi-permeable phospholipid bilayer. Okay, that's way too many words. All it is two layers of these funky looking molecules with a polar head and a non-polar tail. This allows small molecules like water and oxygen to slip right through, whereas larger particles like ions need special channels that can be opened or closed, which gives the cell control of what goes in and out. Naturally, particles move with the gradient, so from a place of high concentration to a place of low concentration. Or, in the case of water, it can also move to a place of high solute concentration, so for example, salt. Welcome to Biology Pro Tips Season 1. Tip of the day, do not drink too much salt water. There's a bunch of salt in salt water. In fact, more salt than inside of a cell, which means it will draw water from your cells and dehydrate you. Yeah, that's it. Have a great day. Anyway, the process of balancing out gradients is known as diffusion and happens automatically. But by using a little bit of energy, particles can actively be moved against the gradient. The energy comes from adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. To be exact, the highly energetic chemical bonds between the phosphate groups can be broken to obtain energy. This is kind of important, as in every organism and every cell needs to make ATP, for example, through cellular respiration, which happens in the mitochondria. Together with oxygen, glucose, so sugar, is turned into water, carbon dioxide, and ATP. This is nice, but it only works if you already have glucose. Humans are heterotrophs. They eat food, inside of which is sugar, which is then broken down into glucose. Plants, on the other hand, are autotrophs. Simply put, they said, screw food, I'll just make my own glucose by staring at the sun. You see, plant cells have small organelles called chloroplasts, inside of which is chlorophyll, which absorbs red and blue light but reflects green light, which is why most plants look green. The absorbed energy from light is used to split water and make a special form of carbon dioxide, which can then be turned into glucose and oxygen. Okay, quick recap. Once you have glucose, either from food or photosynthesis, you can do cellular respiration to get energy in the form of ATP. Chemically, ATP is what's known as a nucleotide. It has a phosphate group, a 5-carbon sugar, and a nitrogenous base. You know what else is made of nucleotides? Deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA. It consists of 2 strands of nucleotides with the sugar and phosphate groups, but the actually important part is the nitrogenous base, which comes in 4 flavors: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. These bases can form base pairs through hydrogen bonds, where adenine goes with thymine and cytosine goes with guanine. These bonds are what holds the 2 strands of DNA together. Okay, that's cool, I guess, but how the heck does that store genetic information? I'm glad you ask. A gene is a section of this DNA that codes for a special trait by carrying a certain sequence of base pairs, which is like a recipe for making a protein. Why proteins? Because they're really important. They transport molecules, act as enzymes, and determine the way you look. For example, the difference between brown and blue eyes is the amount of a pigment called melanin in the cells of the iris. The OCA2 gene codes for P protein, which we believe controls the amount of melanin in cells, meaning that the proteins made from this gene could be what determines your eye color. Pretty cool! There's just one issue. Your DNA and its information is in the nucleus, but proteins are made in organelles called the ribosomes. How do we get the information from A to B? The answer is RNA. It's kind of like DNA, just that it's most often a single strand. It uses ribose instead of deoxyribose, and instead of thymine it uses uracil, which makes it less stable. But that's besides the point. Here's what RNA actually does. Let's say you want to make the protein coded for by this gene. An enzyme called RNA polymerase will split the DNA and make a strand of RNA with a complementary basis, essentially copying the information